Common Seal, page 11. Mr. Drury's here. Do you have any comments to regard to this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, apart from the leasehold land sales, which are continuing, I mean, interest rates are dropping away still, so we still get people decide to freehold their properties, so that's fine. There's one down the bottom there, subvention agreement. We have one of these agreements made with Port of Napier Limited between the council and the Port of Napier, one of these agreements every year. They refer to the ability of this council to move the deductibility for taxation purposes of grant payments, and the grant payment specifically referred to here is the one to the regional sports park, and move them within members of the group. So the Port of Napier is a member of our group, and they pay tax and we don't. So we are able to, under the tax laws, to move some of our grants to taxpayer members within the group, and so the port, through a subvention agreement, deduct those amounts from their income tax return, and so they pay less tax, and we are paid an amount of money. I think it's in the order of about $500,000 for this year because of the high level of the grant, and that payment is expected towards the end of this current financial year, and it's in our budget.
Question to Mr. Drury.
Councillor Dick.
These ongoing leasehold land sales, which are at a healthy level, are they eroding the capital sum we received from ACC to any significant extent?
No, Council, because to the extent we sell $1 million worth of, or freehold $1 million worth of property, then we get the money in, yep, and we pay it to ACC. We still end up with the original amount that they paid us.
I see, okay.
Yeah, we sell the property, we get another $1 million, and we pay it to them.
So it doesn't affect that original transaction figure?
No, the money achieved from the original transaction is still available to us for investment. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Mr. Drury may or may not be able to answer this one. I take it these are all cross leases?
I can't answer that. I would say some are, but certainly not all.
How many? Perhaps sometime you can just give us.
I'd have to look
just,
at that.
Just let us know. It doesn't need to be through
some
meeting.
will.
You might email us what the proportion of single leases are remaining, and just how many of the, what proportion of these are cross leases. Because we have a constant stream of sales since the discounted offer, which is really quite amazing.
Okay, we can send you an email and tell you how many singles and cross leases have been sold within, say, the last year or two.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really interested in that subvention opportunity. Can we use that with all grants, or is it quite specific? Like, for instance, the grant to the museum.
It's got to be made to a charitable institution. So, yeah, there's not too many of those that we provide grants to, but the museum was certainly one, and the regional sports park is one. And
so it's got to be charitable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Someone happy to move that we deal with that? Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Seconder, Councillor Dick. Put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Righto. As indicated, move to item 11, page 23. I'll hand that over to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This paper follows on from one that was considered at the January Council meeting. Back in July of last year, Council resolved to retain Council Directors on the permanent board of HBRC, and there was a number of other recommendations or resolutions that went alongside that regarding the actual composition or mix of independent and Council Directors. At last month's council meeting, we asked if you would consider a commencement date for the permanent board, and that was really, or partly, around a desire for some certainty by the transitional HBRC board, but also I think a recognition that there's a need to have, as part of good governance, to have a clear expectation set out for the establishment of the permanent board. There was some issues were traversed at that meeting, and one of the ones was really around, because one of the options had been, you'll recall, where financial close on the RWS was not reached by the 30th of June, that there was an option to set up a subsidiary company that would not involve any council of directors and therefore any perceived conflicts of interest or predetermination. So the matter was left to lie on the table, and we were asked to get some legal advice on both the process and the costs for that. That's actually provided in attachment 2 of this agenda item, and it was prepared by Lauren Hibbard from Sainsbury Logan and Williams, who's here in the room if anyone will require questions or answers of Lauren. Yeah, she hasn't run away yet. But I thought it was also useful, just in relation to particularly the questions that were asked at the last council meeting, to retable, if you like, a legal opinion that we had also from Sainsbury Logan and Williams back in July 2013, so in the previous term of council, that really looked at the conflict of interest potential and predetermination potential around the role of council directors on the board of HBRC. So that was prepared by Stuart Webster, who's since left the firm, and but I'm sure that Lauren could answer some questions on that if required. But I think the key points really around Mr Webster's opinion is that the appointment of council directors is positively encouraged by the OAG, the Office of the Auditor General, as a means of producing better informed decision in the interests of council. But also the other key point really is around the ability of council directors to simply abstain from voting on an HBRC board meeting on any matters related to any matter that they wish to vote on at the council potentially. So that was really, I thought it was important that particular opinion be placed back in front of you and in front of you for the first time for some of you, just to, I guess, reassure people that there are options involved. There are other options other than just setting up the legal entity. However, the setting up of the legal entity is also an option, and it could be very straightforward. There's actually already templates in place within the organisation to do such a thing. So it could, in a sense, be very straightforward. And it could quite clearly, as part of its own constitution, just state that no council of directors would be appointed to it, and that would meet the requirements of what you sought as part of your deliberations last month. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan?
I'll kick off. Given that we've got another paper that requests, I think is the right word, that the financial close for RWSS moves 3 months out to the 30th of June, why would we, and it's only 3 months away, why would we try and create difficulties for ourselves by appointing council of directors at this point in time? Now, I understand your point about getting some certainty for the existing HBRC board, and we could go through the process of doing interviews and so forth, but not make the appointment until the financial close date is reached and the decision about RWSS is made, thereby avoiding all of these legal niceties that it's proposed we enter into to avoid the conflict of interest. Now, this is presupposing that if RWSS doesn't go ahead and HBRC only have one investment, whether we actually need HBRC or not, which is, I think, the first discussion we should be having.
Sorry, I may have put the Chief Executive off there.
Yeah, the Chief Executive has no idea how to respond now.
because the Chairman was putting his 10 cents worth in on the way through, which wasn't helpful.
Why we wait until...
Why aren't we
Okay.
waiting? Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause
Okay, so you might recall that at the paper last month there was 3 options
Yep.
put forward to you, and 2 of them assumed financial close on the 30th of June, and one did not. And this is really the issue if, or this would be the situation that could potentially apply if financial close is not reached. So there's a chance, or a decision, or is never going to be reached. One of those two. If it's reached by the 30th of June, or if the scheme's abandoned by the 30th of June, then the options are quite straightforward. So this is really just looking at that option 3. What happens if the process is still not quite resolved on the 30th of June? And we need to extend it out. How could that potentially be dealt with? I mean, I think it would be any council director appointed to the board would have to make their own mind up as to whether or not they wish to abstain from voting on it. I did note in my paper that that council has actually made its substantive decision on investing, and that the decision that you'll be required to make now is whether or not the conditions precedent have been met. So not the substantive decision around investment. So in a sense, that's, if you like, more clear-cut, less political, if I can use that. So therefore, less opportunity for there being perceived to be potential conflict of interest or predetermination.
So what we're really discussing here is the possibility that financial close is not met on 30th of June, right?
That's right, what the situation would be around the permanent board.
So the lawyers have made 3 alternative recommendations that we could utilise to overcome this conflict of interest problem. One is temporary removal of councillor directors. Well, why would you bother appointing them at all? The second is delegation of decision-making to a subsidiary entity. That doesn't actually remove director responsibility. Directors are responsible for subsidiary entries anyway. And the third is appointment of alternative directors. Well, we've got a temporary board now, so why would we appoint some other alternate directors? It just, none of these make any sense to me.
So
and if I can just finish. I still have the view that the perception here of conflict is just as important as the actual, and I'm satisfied there's not an actual, but the perception is just as important, as we all know. And we've removed the CEO from doing the dual position of being CEO of this council as well as being CEO of HBRC. Why would a councillor be any less conflicted than the CEO is? So my view is that we should proceed, if we're going to continue with HBRC, that we proceed with the interviewing of potential directors and so forth, to agree on who the final board would be, but to not actually make that appointment until the RWSS decision is made.
Well, that's a view. Councillor Barker.
I support that view. I just make an observation to go through. The Chief Executive spoke about abstaining from voting with relation to avoiding a conflict of interest. Abstaining from voting does not avoid a conflict of interest. To avoid a conflict of interest, you have to do much more than simply abstain from a vote. So make that point. Our question is about point 3 and attachment 2. I was very concerned about this, and it seems to read that once HBRC, which is part of the project agreement, has determined that the conditions precedent are met, and financial close is therefore achieved, that the council itself is bound by that decision. Now, I recall very clearly that this council was very specific in that it itself would make the decision as to whether the conditions precedent had been met. It was not going to delegate that to HBRC at all. So this leaves me in a terrible quandary, because it flies directly against the clear understanding of this council.
We understand your concern, let's get an answer.
So, councillors, this is Lauren Hibbard from Sainsbury Logan and William.
Just
Um,
pop your button.
Lauren, yeah, that'd be great, and maybe move it a bit forward. But sorry, you were in the process of relocating. But Councillor Barker's asked a question in relation to paragraph 3 of your legal opinion, and around conditions precedent.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So, Councillor Barker, at the moment, the way the documents are drafted, the concession deed and the project agreement is between HBRC and the Royal Tānawhau Limited Partnership. Concession deeds between Council and the Royal Tānawhau Limited Partnership. The way the documents are currently drafted, HBRC would be the one who would make the decision under the project agreement about whether or not the preconditions have been met. And at that point, the concession deed would come into play. So there is not, as far as I'm aware, a provision in the concession deed which allows you to say the preconditions under the project agreement have not been met.
Well, if that's the case, then those documents have been incorrectly drafted, because this council was very clear that the decision as to whether the conditions precedent were met
You're getting into
would be
debate,
this decision.
councillor. I mean, you've got a view and we'll hear it shortly. Any other questions?
We
Councillor
were
Scott,
not going to delegate that.
do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question.
And-
Thank you. And through you to Ms Hibbard, thank you for this information. I'd just like to clarify, to get some further detail around your paragraphs 11 and 12 about setting up their subsidiary and passing all the documentation and the assets, the intellectual property, etc., into a subsidiary. You suggest it might be straightforward, but it actually comes with it quite a considerable cost of doing the proper due diligence, etc., and passing it over, does it not?
If the subsidiary is set up as it's a fully owned subsidiary of HBRC, and HBRC has the assets initially, then doing the transfer from HBRC to the subsidiary could well be quite straightforward. It's going to depend a wee bit on exactly what the nature of those assets are. The resource consents presumably would be the main part of that. And so it will depend a little bit on exactly how those issue and what they look like. There may be some issues in terms of accounting and how that transfer is made in the books, if you like. But as I say, we would need to look into that a little bit more once we know exactly what the assets are that are going to be transferred from HBRC to the subsidiary if you decide to go down that route.
And it would mean changes right through the operation deed too, would it not? Because that would become the new entity in that.
Potentially. So if the council decides that you want to put a subsidiary in place to effectively take the place of HBRC in terms of making decisions about whether preconditions have been met or not, then the cleanest way to do that would be to ensure that the subsidiary is the party to the project agreement rather than HBRC.
Can I just ask a question then in relation to that? If you're at the point come the end of June that you are very close to a financial close and forming the limited partnership, would the alternative a proposal to look at how council directors handle their voting, would that then suffice in seeing that there was no conflict? And if council directors abstain from voting, are they not still collectively responsible for the decision?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So I think what I have said in here is that if you keep all of your independent directors that you have, your current setup, you don't have any councillor directors on HBRC at the moment, keep all of the independent directors and let them make the decision, that is going to be your safest option. If, however, those directors are, some of them want to step out or they feel uncomfortable about the fact that HBRC is currently owning both a holding asset of the shares in the port as well as this development asset of the dam. And one of the ways to get around that would be to have a subsidiary where you put your development assets, if you like, as opposed to nominal just holding assets like the shares, which you could keep in HBRC. You could then have your mixed model at HBRC level, but have only independents at the subsidiary level. If you have directors who abstain from voting at HBRC, so if you went ahead and put your mixed model in place and then had councillor directors abstaining, they are still directors of that company, so they are still responsible for ensuring that the company is meeting its obligations and not trading recklessly and things like that. So I guess the question comes down to perception again, as opposed to actual. I agree that you could avoid some perhaps actual conflict by abstaining, but I think perception-wise there's still that possibility that the public is going to perceive that there is some conflict, and I think, as you will all know, when you sit around a board table, even if somebody is in the room but they don't vote on something, they will often have influence in that meeting regardless, even if they don't vote. So it depends the level of action that you want to take to address this issue.
Teasing this out, if I may, if you withdraw completely from any and do not receive matters, I mean, you can put up Chinese walls within a company, is it then possible that you can be shown to be? Because we're not talking about actual, we are talking about perception. I want some cleaner, clean actions here.
So if the councillor directors were to leave the meeting room entirely, leave the decision making up to an independent board solely, I can't give you a 100% guarantee, but certainly that gives you a greater deal of certainty that you're not going to be considered to be influencing decision and in a conflict situation. But it doesn't address it. It doesn't change the fact that as a director of that company, you're still responsible.
Yeah. And may I ask just one final question on this, Mr. Chairman, and that is the decision to set up a subsidiary would be HBRC's decision, not this council's decision. Would that be right?
Well, technically, yes, HBRC's decision, although council is obviously in control of HBRC as shareholder. But so the suggestion that I've made around that is that if you did go ahead with that you would have your full 4 independent directors versus your maximum 3 councillor directors, so that you have got an independent majority on your HBRC board in terms of any decisions made about that subsidiary.
Thank you, Councillor Balfour.
I'd like to pick up right at that point because I'm troubled by a number of suggestions that have been made in this follow-up memo that